Hi everyone, welcome. What you see over here are some of the trays that I keep my worms in. Um, One of the systems over there on the lower left is actually a tray that's got a bag suspended within it. It's in that bag that I keep my mixed population of worms. It's just a variety of different worm breeds in there. And what happened when I launched that system 24 days ago was that I held on to the castings that those worms used to occupy, and those castings are over here in this middle box on the ground. And the reason I do that is that there's probably a bunch of cocoons that were left behind by the worms. Even though the worms got relocated into their new home, I wanted to give the cocoons in that material a chance to hatch. So I've been kind of nurturing that container, checking in on it, making sure there's adequate moisture, and hopefully at some point soon we'll begin to see the emergence of baby worms. We'll round them up and reintroduce them to the population that spawned off their cocoons originally, and then we can start treating that as a finished batch of castings. So I'm checking in on these two systems right now. Why don't you join me? We'll head over to the bench now. I have my glove on, and if we need it, I've got my spray bottle full of water, because the only thing we normally do on a cocoon nursery, quote unquote cocoon nursery, some people might just treat it as a batch of compost, heck with the cocoons, give it to the plants. But you know, from my point of view, a cocoon nursery that's still just a few weeks old, it could very well just seem like a batch of castings still. But we really want to make sure that the environment remains hospitable for baby worms, and for that matter for the cocoons themselves, so that they eventually do emerge from them. And the dampness of the material, I believe, is one of the factors that do contribute to sort of quick hatching of the cocoons. I don't know, sometimes I worry about the dampness, but my first impression just from touching this top surface here is that it's it almost emanates moisture. You know, you can feel something when it's damp right away, even through the glove. So I'm wondering if it might not be necessary today to dampen the material. Let's just till through it really quick. If we sense that additional moisture would benefit, then we can always add it, but my first impressions are already telling me that we're a-okay in here as far as moisture goes. It would be nice to see some baby worms, but it might just be a little bit early for that. Besides babies, there's always that chance that there's a couple worms that sort of snuck by when I did the extraction of the population out of this box. So I might not have succeeded in relocating 100% of the worms out of this system, so there could be a few stragglers. And I guess their size might tell us whether or not they just sort of slip through the process of separating the worms, or if they were born here. I got a feeling a worm this size might have just slipped through the process. Might have been a little bit smaller than 3.5 weeks ago. Here too I'm seeing a couple, perhaps even smaller. Not by much though, possibly the same size or very slightly younger. Pretty small. Hard to tell. I can't look at a worm and judge how old it is just from its size. And I'm sure there's a lot of variables that would influence how quickly a worm would grow. So the worms look okay. There's a couple that we spotted. But my hope is that soon we'll begin checking in here and seeing many, many more. So I was questioning whether I wanted to still keep mounding stuff up the way I had it before, sort of concentrating the material to one edge of the bin, making it a little bit more cube shape as opposed to flat with greater surface area to emit its moisture. I think that was the main reason I tried to sort of mound it up in the first place, was to preserve moisture with the possibility of some drying. So I think, you know, if it seems to be working well, and it does, I'm going to return the configuration to the way it was when we checked in here. We didn't really see many signs of cocoons hatching or many baby worms coming online, but I got a feeling that as they do, we've got an environment here that should be pretty cozy for them. as far as dampness goes. I'm sure there's loads and loads of leftover material in here that they could use as either bedding or grit or food. So I'm not going to worry too much about that either. So let's get this thing covered back up. And then we could proceed to checking in on the bin where the adults got moved into and have been for the past 24 days. Well, I call it a bin, but it's a bag. It's a bag suspended within a bin. It's my VermiBag tote. It just sits within a box similar to this. I mean, it's called VermiBag tote, so the suggestion is that the thing runs within a tote. But that's not necessarily true either, because some people opt to run the bag suspended within a frame, which is how I ran it originally when I first got it. So let's go get that bag out here now. Check out how the adult worms are doing. Alright, so now we're on to the VermiBag tote. This thing's got a zip top, which I think is useful because the worms that are in here, these blue worms, have a tendency sometimes right after a disruption like a feeding, or some people say even during stormy weather, these worms tend to panic a little bit, and they'll start trying to climb out of their container. And here with the zipped shut top, I feel like they can climb all they want, should they want to again, because it has happened to me in the past. It's not just hearsay that I'm repeating. So I can attest to the fact that it does happen. Here I don't worry so much. If I till up the container, I know that I've disrupted the worms. I know that if they decide to climb, I don't have to sweat it because they're not going anywhere. So this was kind of exposed to the air because the plastic was placed on the two outer edges. I had set it up that way thinking that maybe these two sheets of cardboard, as well as that piece of paper there, that coffee filter, those might be able to, on their own, hold down some of the moisture in the middle. And they seem like they've done a pretty good job. And then naturally right over here under the plastic sheets, we're going to find good moisture. And we find it almost all the way out to the edge. On this side, it's all the way out to the edge. Here, not quite. The reason why I think we did that was we tried to extend the plastic coverage out closer to the edge. On these edges, we couldn't really do much. But here we got a little bit more dampness going on. So it does feel like overall we've succeeded in, just by taking what was here already, expanding it out a little bit, we managed to keep more of the container more damp, I believe. But I believe that was only because I was maybe too lazy to go find a replacement plastic covering that's perhaps a little bit bigger. Doesn't even have to be a replacement, I guess. It could just be a little extra piece that sits in between the two chunks of bubble wrap and kind of covers the little bit that's not so well protected from moisture loss. I'm seeing a good amount of leftovers here. You know, I didn't really come down here prepared with food. Sometimes I come down here with my meal plan already figured out and the food over here next to me waiting to be fed. But here I decided we would take the time to just check in on the system. In 9 days for what's thought to be a pretty good sized population that I've got in here, which I think we do. You know, I mean, sometimes you look around and you do find a good large mound of worms hanging out together, having a little bit of a worm party, probably enjoying some delicious morsel of food. Sometimes they just maybe slow down a little bit due to temperature, I believe. I must say the window that keeps the cold out down here in my nursery, my cocoon nursery. Here I am calling my wormery a nursery. Down here in my wormery, it gets a little chilly sometimes because it's not a very good window. It's kind of a cheesy, cheap window. I even try to seal it off when I feel like I'm not going to be opening it up anymore. When it's getting cold enough to do so, I'll just seal off the perimeter of it with some tape, try to keep the breeze from blowing in around it, because it is, like I said, a really cheesy, cheap window. This is kind of fun. It's not just worms, it's all the bedding that they're kind of entangled with. They really do seem to enjoy this bedding. been really generous with the bedding in my systems lately, and I think it helps a lot. I think the worms definitely appreciate it. Alright, so I feel like I could probably add a little bit more food to today's check-in. Be kind of a shame to have the system all opened up here and not feed just because we bumped into a few leftovers. I mean, we have to acknowledge the fact that there is still food in here from the previous feeding, but they're obviously doing away with it. I believe some people have similar experiences to mine, that the apple just seems to take a little longer than some other foods. As much as you would think that it's kind of a nice juicy and sweet food item that the worms would probably do away with really quickly, it somehow, I don't know, maybe is resistant to decomposition or something. So maybe it just takes a little while for it to finally break down to a stage where the worms can actually make use of it. So I'm obviously opening up a little hole here in the middle where we can submerge today's feeding, but I've also been trying at the same time to really commingle some of the more dry materials that we found along the way with more damp stuff that's right near it. And I am tempted to try to help this system preserve what moisture is in it, and not let more of it be lost to evaporation. So we might come up with some sort of an enhancement to the coverings, I think, at the end. I mean, those two pieces of bubble wrap are doing a great job where they cover, but there's also spots where they just don't cover, and I'd like to see the moisture in the system be held on to a little bit better than it's been doing. I don't know, I was about to just kind of go for a pause there to shoot upstairs to the refrigerator to get some food for these little guys. But then I was kind of I just started probing around over here, and I felt like I was bumping into sections where maybe we had not yet checked, and it felt like really damp. Maybe there was some food over there. I thought we might bump into some worms over there too. But I think we made ourselves a pretty good size opening here where we can drop in today's portion. I think I'm going to go a little bit minimalistic on it since there are leftovers. I don't want to just keep crowding this thing full of food if it's not absolutely necessary. But we are going to feed, so let me head up to the refrigerator now and we'll get these little guys a little something to eat. The assortment of yummy food items that I bought down here for them consists of coffee inside of its coffee filter, as well as some shavings off of some root vegetables, maybe the stems and leaves of some other vegetable. This is what they're going to get. Along with this, they're going to get a little portion of crushed eggshell. It's what I use in my worm bins for grit, and I've also got the foundation of the feeding, which is some of my pre-made bedding, so we'll drop that in first. It'll act as a little bit of a sponge once the juices from those frozen veggies start to come out of the material as it thaws. And I've also got some coffee here, which I wanted to sort of blend in here with this bedding I laid down, so that's another option to help this coffee more easily break down, I believe. Sort of just spread it around within the neighboring material. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Save a little bit of that for at the end. Okay, got most of it there. I tried to be a little bit moderate in terms of how much I gave them here. It's a nice feeding, I believe, in complement to the existing leftovers that are already in here. Seems to me like if we were to check in another 9 or 10 days again, like we did this time, we'll probably find fewer leftovers. I got a feeling that apple probably doesn't have much longer to go before it's all been consumed. I'm pretty sure all this stuff's going to go pretty quickly too, once the worms break into it. So I guess extra bedding we can include down here in the feeding area. We're sort of in surplus mode now with our coffee filters. Remember, this one was in the middle over here, marking where we last fed, but what we could do is we could just use the nice new fresh one to do that anymore, and we'll just beef up the bedding down here within the feeding area by tearing up this coffee filter for them. Okay, so I think we could begin covering up here. Let's level stuff off. Throw some of this pile of bedding over here that I found as we dug around. We'll get that in there as well. See if we find any other little stashes of bedding that seems like it's in need of a little bit more attention. There we go, a little bit more. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of this stuff scattered throughout. I think we're a little bit sloppy in here. We did, I believe, leave a good amount of just leftover apple bits, probably right out on the surface. Luckily, this system's protected from intruders with this zip top cover. It's got a mesh opening, so it allows for good airflow. That's the reason we still need to protect it from losing its moisture. Even though it's got a cover, it's not much of a cover because it does ventilate quite nicely. So let's return things kind of the way we found them. I'm thinking we probably don't need much to help kind of beef this system's capability of preserving its moisture up a little bit. I think all we really need to do is maybe add just one more little complementary cover. Down at the bottom of this bag I can see a little bit of vegetation that was probably leftover stuff that was stuck to the inside of the bag. The bag was probably used to bring food down here. I probably didn't need much, but I figured, hey, this pretty good sized bag was handy. It was a little bit soiled already anyway, so I figured I'd grab it, and it's going to help out keeping a little bit more moisture down the middle here where it was getting a little bit dry. It looks like this is actually going to help quite a bit all the way around the edge too, so maybe at some point the bubble wrap can just go away and this will serve as its replacement. I guess the I don't even know if this really serves much purpose. Maybe this too can go into the bed at some point as just bedding, but maybe we could just treat this as sort of just something to prevent excess light from coming in through this mesh here, because I mean, you can't really see too much through it. It does pretty much block out the majority of the light, so it's kind of dark in there anyway, but just in case some sun streams into the wormery and onto the shelf and right onto this container, that paper will just keep things nice and dark down there for the worms so they don't feel invaded by brightness or anything else that bothers them. Alright everyone, that's it for today's check-in with my mixed colony of worms. 24 days into their new environment here, and 24 days into us trying to see if we can, you know, reclaim some baby worms from the cocoons that these little guys left behind in their old material. We'll see where that leads. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please remember to leave me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching.